Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special broadcast on this Sunday morning. Obviously, this isn't a TED Excellence, as you might otherwise expect. But truth be told, I was actually looking for a TED or a TEDx talk that covered this subject. Now, there may be one out there somewhere, and I have found several TEDx and TEDx or TED Talks and TEDx talks that have talked about eliminating prisons and restorative justice and things like that. And contained therein, there some of them that I've seen and watched. They've mentioned the idea of getting rid of police or replacing police, but I haven't found one yet that explicitly talked about getting rid of police entirely. And since that is a hot topic in the current year, or at least in the current moment, I was curious to know what the argument is for that. Even though I think on its face it's probably a bad idea, I am curious to know what the sales pitch would be from a at least presumably credible source. So I pulled up this article that I found that was posted just a few days ago on Mother Jones. I haven't read it myself, so I'm going into this blind, as I assume most of you are. And together, maybe we'll learn at least what the argument is. And what the sales pitch is, and see if there are any aspects to it that are agreeable, reasonable, or otherwise. Because I am genuinely curious to know. But before we get there, thank you, tall person, before the stream. Happy National Bourbon Day, everybody. Oh boy. Well, I won't be having a pepper jack for this one. I have but water. I want to be able to at least be somewhat coherent as I go through this, since it is a recitation and not pure commentary. I am debating, I have a TEDx regarding police reform ready to go. I am debating doing that today or waiting to do that tomorrow. I'll decide shortly. But regardless, for those of you that have joined me to potentially learn something new, Tall Person, hello. Stefan Tyler, hello. Loki Lycan, hello. Mateo Ravenblade, hello. Eric Grunstadter, hello. Corey Suzuki, hello. Lurking Gopher, hello. Chicago Mike, hello. Stargazer Nuts, hello. Kanan, hello. Graf Spree, hello. Big Assassinati, hello. And the Luke Skywalker 2, hello. Attack Alpaca, hello. Havoc Vladimirovich Stanov, hello. Sean Uli, hello. You hear nothing? Do you guys hear me? My microphone's on. Uh-oh. Are you guys not hearing me? That'll be bad. I hear you, says Tall Person. Okay. I got scared there for a second. I thought, uh-oh, did I mute my microphone again? No, I didn't. Okay. Anyway, Tarkata, hello. Amanda Wolfchild, hello. And Hammond Beans, hello. Maxwell Moreno, hello. All You Need, hello. All right, guys. A non-vitae Rex, hello. All right. So that little paranoia moment out of the way. So here we go. This is from Mother Jones, posted, I believe, June 2nd, if I'm not completely mistaken. Yes, June 2nd, 2020. What a world without cops would look like. This is by Madison Pauley at Mother Jones. No idea who she is. Let's see. Following the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis and an outbreak of police violence in response to nationwide protests. An outbreak of police violence in response to nationwide protests. I guess it depends on what we're talking about. Because if we're talking about riot control during riots, yes, that's violence, but it's not an inherently malicious violence. I know I'm talking contradictions of terms, but there's justified violence and then there's just violent. But police violence sounds so villainous by itself. Anyway, I digress. Calls for change in America's police departments are coming from activists, public officials, and celebrities. And that last part is the most important, after all, celebrities. But unlike past attempts to reform the police in the wake of high-profile killings of people of color, which often centered on increased oversight or training, this time the demands are far more radical. Defund police departments or abolish them entirely. Efforts to cut off funding for police have already taken root in Minneapolis, where the police department's budget currently totals $193 million. And then in parentheses, in 2017, the department received 36% of the city's general fund expenditures. 2 days after Floyd's killing, the president of the University of Minnesota declared that the campus would no longer contract with the police department to provide security for large gatherings like football games. On Friday, a member of the Minneapolis Board of Education announced a resolution to end the school district's contract to station 14 cops in its schools. And community groups such as the Black Visions Collective and Reclaim the Block are petitioning the city council to cut the... Good God. I am talking faster than I can read. Slow down, Scribe. There's time. The city council to cut the police department's budget by $45 million and reinvest the money in health and non-police safety programs. All right. With other campaigns to cut police budgets underway in cities like Los Angeles and New York, the calls to defund the police gathering steam on social media and calls it. Okay. I spoke with Brooklyn College sociology professor Alex Vitale, the coordinator of the Policing and Social Justice Project and author of The End of Policing, to talk about the sweeping vision of police abolition and what it means in practice. Okay, now that I've got the introduction out of the way, thank you, Point Curation. In a pinch, a broom and duct tape plus knife equals spear. Yes, that is true. I don't know why I'd need that unless I was in like Fallout 76 or something. But thank you, Point Curation, if you're giving advice for self-defense. So we have a bona fide, at least as far as the subject is concerned, expert about to be interviewed. Alex Vitale, a professor and an author specifically about ending policing. All right, so like a TEDx talk, I'm going into this presuming that the speaker is an expert in their field and that whatever credibility they have on the subject precedes them. And like I say, I haven't read this, so I don't know what the argument is, but I will take a breath, slow down, and dive in. So Madison Pauley asks, why defund the police rather than reform them? And Alex Vitale answers, 5 years ago, in the wake of the murders of Mike Brown and Eric Gardner and Tamir Rice, we were told, quote, don't worry, we're going to fix it. We're going to give the police implicit bias training. We're going to hold some community police encounter sessions. We're going to buy some body cameras, unquote. A whole set of what we often refer to as procedural reforms designed to make the police more professional, less biased, more transparent, and that this is going to magically fix the problem. But things did not get better. People are still being killed, and more importantly, the problem of over-policing remains. The cops have always, unfortunately, ended up killing people. It depends on the circumstances of the killing. Was it justified? Wasn't it? Etc. And over-policing. I mean, I don't know if he's going to expand on that to describe what he means by over-policing, or if he's going to differentiate between justified and unjustified killings, but we'll see. Thank you, Chicago Mike. Mike Brown was not murdered. Yeah, well, I could go into grand detail on some of the claims here. There's only so much time in the day, however. But yeah, Mike Brown was not murdered. He attacked a police officer, tried to grab his gun. The police officer fired back in response in self-defense. Eric Gardner conceivably was murdered. Tamir Rice is a sketchy one in a lot of ways, but it was someone who had a gun. Did the police react too quickly in shooting Tamir Rice? Possibly so, but given the information they had at the time, they didn't necessarily have much of a choice. You have someone sitting in a park waving a gun at police. Turned out to be a fake gun, but it's one of those like perfect storm tragedies in that instance. Eric Gardner's the one instance where it was like, okay, that was unnecessary. That was overuse of force, and that guy was choked to death right there in the street. So, yeah. There are longer conversations to be had about all three of those cases, but again, I'm reading it as it is written. Then the question is asked of the professor, why didn't it work? And his answer, procedural justice folks, they want to restore the public's trust in the police so that the police can go back to policing. But this ignores the question of what they are policing and whether they should be policing it. Okay, in brackets, millions of, I don't know why they put that. We have millions of low-level arrests in the United States every year, and most of them are completely pointless. It is just a huge level of harassment meted out almost exclusively on the poorest and most marginal communities in our society. There is a deep resentment about policing in those places. And then, when there's a high-profile incident, it unleashes all this pent-up anger and rage. So we should just elevate the threshold of what constitutes a crime then to what? Get rid of city ordinances. And I don't know what he means by low level. Again, he'd have to give more details and explain what he means. What is a low level arrest? I mean, or what should I say is the highest threshold of a low level arrest that we should reconsider? And as far as and then there's a high profile incident and unleashes all this pent up anger and rage. I can understand that to a certain extent, depending on the context. But the anger and rage that leads to rioting and looting and everything else has nothing to do with the incident in question. I mean, protesting, marching, sit-ins, peaceful actions like that. But as soon as you start destroying things and victimizing other people far beyond the scope of anything having to do with the actual event, that is not justified any further. That's me talking. Back to the interviewer. Reducing policing goes hand in hand with widespread decriminalization, then, of things like having an open container in your front yard or selling untaxed cigarettes. Okay, that wasn't a question by the interviewer. That's a statement, but okay. And the response is absolutely. It goes hand in hand with decriminalizing sex work, okay, drugs, to what extent? Homelessness, mental illness. Decriminalizing mental illness. Mental illness is not illegal. People acting out in ways that harm others ends up causing crimes. And anyway, I could go on. Back to the professor. We don't really need a vice unit. We don't? Okay. We need a system of legalized sex work that's regulated just like any other business. I don't entirely disagree with the notion. Okay. We don't need school police. We need counselors and restorative justice programs. Well, I've spoken at length about the effectiveness of restorative justice programs. On the school level, there may be merit there. In fact, there probably is when you're dealing with kids who haven't grown up or haven't learned how to relate to other people or deal with conflicts and so on. I mean, restorative justice in a childhood setting, in a youth setting, there may be merit. Once you get to full adulthood, though, and you get to assaults and robberies and things like that, sorry, restorative justice starts falling apart pretty quick. We don't need school police. I guess it depends on the school. Does the school have a history of problems that lead to actual criminal activity? If you have a school that has no history of such things, then yeah, a police officer at the school is probably unnecessary. But if there has been a pattern of such behavior or occurrences there, or if the school is situated in a place that is under threat for some reason by outside forces, it might make sense to at least have a point of contact there that has authority as a police officer. I don't think you can just cast a wide net like that and say no school should have a police officer. All depends. Back to the professor. We don't need police homeless outreach units. We need supportive housing, community-based drop-in centers, social workers. We don't need police homeless outreach units. I don't know if our speaker is aware of the rate of crime amongst the homeless, amongst themselves. Drug use, assault, rape, theft, and so on. We need supportive housing. Okay, community-based drop-in centers, social workers. I don't know what a drop-in center is, or at least in this context, what it would involve. So, okay. Back to the interviewer. How do you mesh the idea of police abolition with the need to address serious public safety threats like murder or aggravated assault when those crimes are committed by the general public? Okay, the last part was in parentheses. All right, and that is really what it comes down to in the most extreme of questions. What do you do about serial rapists, serial murderers, or just murderers, or just one-off? I mean, any crime like that, any crime where someone is savagely assaulted in some way, shape, or form. Their safety, their life is completely put into danger or taken. All right. That always becomes the greatest question I have about restorative justice, and it is, at least in the extreme, the most important question I have about a world without police. So here is the professor's answer. The criminal justice system says there's one strategy for everything. Make arrests, put them in prison. No, actually it doesn't. Because there's prosecutorial discretion. There's police discretion. There's plea bargains. There's diversionary programs. There's parole. There's good time in prison, and on and on. Okay, but again, this is his answer. So I'll start over and try not to interrupt myself. I'll wait until I get to the end of his answer. The criminal justice system says there's one strategy for everything. Make arrests, put them in prison. What abolitionists say is, well, let's figure out why they're doing this and try to develop concrete prevention strategies. Not all homicides are the same. Is it a domestic violence case? Is it a school shooting? Is it a drug deal gone bad? We know, for instance, that in almost all of these I want to be accurate. We know, for instance, that in almost all these school shooting cases, somebody had a pretty good idea that this might happen, but did not tell anyone or told the police, and the police had no tools to do anything about it. What if instead we had a system in place where when a young person thinks their friend might do something awful, can go and talk to a responsible adult without worrying that the police will get involved, that they will have ratted on their friend to the police, or that their friend will get expelled from school because of some zero-tolerance policy. It's important to remember that there is no perfect world. There's no perfect solution. What we have now is far from perfect. People get killed all the time, even though our society is filled with police. Can we come up with a situation where there are fewer killings and fewer collateral consequences? Why are you asking that question? Is my response to the professor. You teach this. You wrote a book on this. You do have an alternative. So your alternative to police is to not have police. And there has to be, I guess you say, some system where a kid who thinks their friend might do something bad tells a responsible adult. Kids can't do that now. I mean, a kid can't go to a teacher or something. And what then is supposed to happen? What would the responsible adult do that the police wouldn't do? And what does knowing why someone was murdered stop murder? I mean, I'm going to go back slightly. Not all homicides are the same. Is it a domestic violence case? Is it a school shooting? Is it a drug deal gone bad? Okay, well, let's say you know that. You come across a dead body, and you find out it was a domestic violence case. The person's still dead. So what do you do then? Go to a responsible adult? Let's say it was a drug deal gone bad. The person's still dead. If you know the motive of the person doing it, what happens after that? If you could know the motive of the person doing it, if it is a school shooting, what then? What do you do with this person? That's the question you have to answer, Professor. You want to abolish the police. You want to abolish, I guess, our criminal justice system. So what is your proposal in replacement? It doesn't, I know I'm talking to the ether here, but it doesn't have to be like completely point by point, bullet point by bullet point, here's how everything would work, because, systems are an evolving process. Okay, but you have to have at least a proposal, right? Maybe we'll get to that later in the article, because so far he's asking himself questions that he should already have the answers to if he's going to be saying, get rid of everything. Thank you, Pinkal, the Driving Ape Man. You are sounding like my Twitter argument last night. Well, like I said, I want to hear from someone who takes this seriously and what their serious proposal is. I want to be able to entertain a notion without necessarily having to accept it, but I at least want to know what the argument is. Back to the interviewer. Where did the movement to abolish the police come from? Okay, I have to wonder if this interview was conducted live. Because if I was talking to this person face to face and they asked those rhetorical questions back to the interviewer about the subject they're supposed to be an expert on, I would have a lot more questions, as I just, said. So was this like a bunch of emailed questions and you just took his answers and pasted them in? Because that's what it seems like. Okay, anyway, the interviewer asks again, where did the movement to abolish the police come from? Answer, it began to take a coherent shape in the late 60s, early 70s. Initially, the radical edge of this, from the Black Panthers and others, was the idea of community control of the police. But a group of activists and academics wrote a document called The Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove, in which they began to say, quote, wait a second, is there any policing that's actually a good idea, unquote. When we understand the fundamental nature of policing, even if the community has control over it, it's still a state institution that's predicated on the use of violence to fix problems. And historically, it has never operated in the interests of the poor and the non-white. After the 70s, this idea became very dormant. It was the rise of mass incarceration in the last 20 years that has brought this idea back to the fore. A little over 20 years ago, Critical Resistance was formed in California, which was mostly focused on prison abolition. This led to works by Angela Davis and Ruth Wilson Gilmore that were focused on prison abolition. But communities understood that to achieve prison abolition, we need to do something about policing as well. So why do I keep saying litter? Little campaigns began to pop up. In the Black Lives Matter era, there's been a deepening of analysis among the activists who initially just wanted to jail some killer cops, but then began to see that this would not really fix the problem. Okay, I've done at least 1 or 2 videos on prison abolition before, which, of course, is replaced with restorative justice programs more often than not. I've talked at length about that. Okay, so abolishing the police came from the Black Panthers and people who see mass incarceration as a problem and so on. And they want to get rid of prisons, but they can't just get rid of prisons. They need to get rid of the, mechanism that puts people into prisons, and that starts with the cops. Okay. Back to the interviewer. Have the campaigns had any victories? Answer. There have been little victories that kind of presaged what we're trying to do, but not a lot. Sometimes what we did is we prevented an increase in spending. People managed to kill a particular program or funding for a new police academy. The victories are not going to look like a police department getting shut down. Really? You're talking about police abolition, and a victory is not a department getting shut down. Okay. A victory is going to look like we got police out of the schools, or we created an alternative to using the police to deal with homelessness. Sure, I guess, if the schools aren't in need of police assistance because of patterns of behavior or groups or organizations or other things that might be a part of the school's culture that lead to violence and criminal activity. I mean, My father was a security official at a high school, and he had a resident school police officer there because that school had a lot of gang activity. And consequently, criminal activity either originated at or was connected to the school on a regular basis. And so it was decided it made sense to have a police officer on site in case something happened, because things had happened in the past. Now, my father was a former, well, I should say he is a former police officer, but he was not a police officer at the time. He was not empowered to arrest people or restrain people or detain people in a way for criminal activity. And there were incidents that occurred at that school during my father's time that I am glad there was a police officer there, let me just say. So, but that's my personal bias getting in. But okay, so he's talking about the victories of this movement are going to be, I guess, incremental. And you have to count those as, okay, first we got this program defunded, and this we got the cops out of the school, and then we created an alternative to using the police to deal with homelessness. I don't think police deal with homelessness. I think police deal with homeless people who end up committing crimes of one form or another. I don't think police are there to solve homelessness. I mean, I know plenty of police officers who have tried to help homeless people into programs or find them shelter in a cold night and that kind of thing. But again, this is a professor of this subject and an author on the subject. So he's answering his own questions. Back to the interviewer. What does this end up looking like on a practical level, say, if my car gets stolen? Okay, good. Very specific question. Let's get a very specific answer, shall we? Answer. A friend of ours, they had their car stolen. The police actually recovered it and arrested the driver. So they were like, see, we need police. And I said, well, let's dig a little deeper here. What do we know about the person who got arrested that stole your car? The police said that he'd been arrested a bunch of times and there was drug paraphernalia left in the car. And I'm like, so we tried policing a bunch of times with this guy. Did it prevent your car from getting stolen? No. Is this person stealing cars because they have a drug problem? Probably. Is sending them to jail over and over again fixing their drug problem? No. Okay, if we want to reduce vehicle thefts, the first time that we come in contact with this person, we've got to start trying to address what's driving their problematic behavior. I wonder if our speaker is aware of diversionary programs, drug rehabilitation programs available to offenders, and so on. You know what the problem with addiction is? Addiction. And if someone doesn't want help or doesn't have it in them to commit to getting help, they're going to reoffend because they're addicted. Now, I have no problem talking about addiction as not a mortal sin. You know, some people get caught in that cycle and they can't get out. But that doesn't forgive theft or assault or robbery or anything else dealing with addiction where they have to feed their addiction. Someone else doesn't have to sit back and say, oh, well, they're a drug addict, so it's okay. What kind of justice can be had? And besides which, we're talking a little bit of Minority Report here, aren't we? Like the first time we come in contact with this person. Well, the first time you come in contact with this person, it's probably a low-level offense, isn't it? You want to decriminalize low-level offenses. So it might have been petty theft or simply being caught with paraphernalia on them. Well, you don't want to jail anybody or punish anybody for low-level offenses. So what? If their addiction gets out of hand afterwards and they continue to commit more and more crimes to feed their addiction, you're just going to keep, diverting them to a rehabilitation program and no justice will be had for the victims? And the person is still allowed to go out and conceivably victimize more people? That's not a solution. You're just asking a question again. Can we find out why they're doing this? Sure you can. How are you going to solve it if they don't want to solve it? Our author is asking a lot of questions, not giving us many answers when he's the one being interviewed. Back to the interviewer. Without police, or with drastically scaled back police forces, how does the picture change for people and communities who don't use the police or trust them? How does the picture change for people and communities who don't use the police or trust them? Well, if you don't use the police and the police aren't around, removing the police from the equation probably changes very little. But okay. Answer. For those folks, the picture changes because hopefully they won't have so many problematic things to deal with. What? The reality is a lot of people just don't call the police as it is because they feel like it's just going to make their lives worse. That is a deep truth. And so what we want to do is not just to leave them on their own, we want to try and start fixing their problems. Like domestic violence, which goes grossly underreported because huge numbers of survivors feel that getting the police involved is just going to make the situation worse. Police come, either do nothing, arrest both parties, or arrest the man whom the woman was financially dependent on. Okay, he's pissed off when he gets out of jail and he comes and beats her up again. Where's the community resource center? Where are the supports for families so that maybe they can fix their problems? Where are the outlets for women so they can live independently to get away from an abuser? There are no women's shelters. There are no centers for assistance to families. I mean, maybe you could argue there aren't enough of them, but then you're not telling us how many there are or what the... Or the one that my brain is broken several times on this paragraph, but the one that caught me the most, or arrest the man whom the woman was financially dependent upon. Well, if he's beating her up, what? So it's the cop's fault that she's dependent upon him financially, and so they shouldn't arrest him? They shouldn't separate them if one spouse is being abusive to the other? And if they're not calling the police in the first place because they don't want the situation to get worse, then the situation isn't going to improve, is it? Like domestic violence, which goes grossly underreported. Well, who are they not reporting it to, might I ask? I feel like I'm reading a TEDx talk. Maybe I am. I should find out if this guy's ever done one. Oh, and we're right at the end of the... That's it? Okay. Last question, I guess. How would things change for the white people who reflexively rely on and trust the police, the Amy Coopers of the world? I'm dying to know the answer to this one. The reflexively rely. Okay. Answer. They won't have this resource that they can weaponize against people. They'll have to figure out other ways of resolving their problems. So, rather than having the insulating step of the Amy Coopers of the world calling the police, you want Amy Cooper to fend for herself in that moment. You want Amy Cooper, who declares that she feels threatened by someone to the point of calling the police, to not have the police to call. You want Amy Cooper to find another way of resolving her problem with someone that she is considering a threat to her safety. That is your response. And the last line here just says, this interview has been edited and condensed. I assume so, because that is about as uninformed a sales pitch as I think I've heard. I think I've heard better TEDx talks about alternatives to police or jails. And not better in the sense that they convinced me, but better in the sense that at least they had something like of a cognizant argument, more or less. That's it. That's it. Asking a bunch of rhetorical questions, imagining there should be a system that can do things differently than police, and leaving it up to the Amy Coopers of the world to solve their own law enforcement problems. And this is from the author of The End of Policing, Alex Vitale, coordinator of the Policing and Social Justice Project and a sociology professor at Brooklyn College. Okay. I'll be honest, I was expecting something more substantive, Irate Bear. And in detail from someone who has written the book on abolishing the police. But I guess that's it. And I feel dissatisfied. More than a little dissatisfied. Thank you, Michael Caruza. Oh, so literally anarchy, awesome. That is what I'm getting from that. Now, like I said, I didn't read this before I read it to you guys and to myself. I honestly thought that I was going to get something even passingly academic. But there's nothing there at all. Now, I did a video a couple of years ago wherein a Black Lives Matter organizer essentially answered this same question. Like, what would you do instead of cops? And her proposal, and the same proposal I'm hearing from activists, is something to the effect, and along the same lines of fast response justice teams or community-based policing and things like that, which obviously carry their own concerns. But this guy just says nothing. He doesn't have an answer. He doesn't have an alternative. Just musings on things that should be, because they should be. So anyway, I've read it. I've said my piece. If you guys have any other observations or comments, let me know in the chat. I may hold off on doing the TED Excellence till tomorrow just to space myself out a little bit. Yeah, if you have anything you'd like to say, put in the chat now. Humble Clay, stronger families, more private assistance, and taking more responsibility equals less crime and less deaths. My brain keeps coming back to the school to prison pipeline conundrum and how almost to a one. In fact, I'm pressed to think of an argument that did. Almost to a one, they always leave out the parents, the home life, anything else in regards to the school part of the school to prison pipeline. It's always the school's fault and or responsibility, nothing to do with the actions of the child or the young adult, and especially nothing to do with the parents' responsibility of over the student. So yeah, if everybody took personal responsibility, etc., yeah, we probably would need less police. But here's the thing. Police, like laws, and their existence, is an admission of the inherent fault in humans. We don't have laws there because we're perfect. We have laws there because we understand we're not. It's an admission of the knowledge of our imperfection. That's why we make up laws, to try to regiment our behavior to each other and to ourselves, because we know how fallible humans are. Let's see. Ryan Rollins, Scribe, YouTube told me about your stream right at the end. Curse them. Well, I can't do anything about YouTube. We need YouTube reform. Pincalo says, oh, I missed a super chat. Did I? I apologize. Oh, sorry, Pincalo. Yeah, that zipped by me. And of course, $2 ones never register for longer than 2 seconds. Why does this sound like domestic violence apologetics? Well, I don't know if it's apologetics so much as it's avoidance. It's like sticking your head in the sand. It's like, well, domestic violence. Well, I mean, what happens with domestic violence? Well, you just end up arresting somebody or do nothing or take the man the woman is financially dependent on away. So what's the alternative? I mean, he told us the alternative is you don't report it, because if there's no one to report it to, you don't report it. So those things go underreported because people don't want to get police involved. Well, okay. If you take the police out of the equation, then there's nobody to report it to. And so what happens then? If someone hears someone being beaten up in their home, who do they call? Do they go over themselves and try to break up a violent situation all on their own without any training or sanction? What is the alternative? Another monitoring, Scribe light, number one cause of death in abusive relationships, not leaving. Sometimes that's so. Sometimes you get stalked. I've known several instances of people leaving and then being hunted down. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't leave a bad situation, but yeah, no, it really comes down to the individual doing the abuse. What can you do about them? El Vaquero 555, Scribe Light, if we just got rid of police, once the chaos finally started to subside, we'd settle in on an honor society. Slap scribbles with glove. Sir, I challenge you to a duel. Yeah, we need flintlocks at dawn again. That's what we need. Let's see, Michael Caruso. So all victims of domestic violence are women, and none of them are financially independent? According to our speaker, I guess that's the common theme. I don't know, because he didn't provide any statistics about anything, being an academic and a professor. And yeah, and since all of those questions seem to be emailed, you would think that if he's sitting at his computer answering these things in an email or something, he'd have the time to, provide some facts and statistics, since he is the author of the book on the subject. Thank you, Chicago Mike. I'm waiting until we have a private police department like Pinkerton Detective Agency was used in 1800. Yeah, mercenaries, guys. That's what we need. We need private mercenary police forces. Let's bring those back. Remember when those were good? Yeah, neither do I. You know why? Because they stopped a couple hundred years ago. Yeah. Let's bring them back. Oh boy, the Pinkertons. Humble Clay, a few law enforcement veterans have said that a domestic violence call is the most difficult and deadliest call to respond to. Yeah, is true. And then Jim Healis, we'll have private police departments like OCP. Yes, Omni Consumer Products. Yes, let's turn everything over to corporate-run police departments. When the local police departments finally get abolished, well, there'll be a market for policing. Michael Cruz, thank you. Reject police, embrace organized crime. That's what's going to happen. You'll have protection groups. You'll have some group that starts out as some kind of community neighborhood watch kind of thing, and then those people spending all that time are going to want some return on their investment of time. So they're going to need some protection money, and on and on and on. Everything starts out like it's for the community and for the betterment, right? Yeah. Let's see. Sorry, Jim. Warlords are the ultimate private police. After a fashion, I suppose, policing their own conquests. Death Glock. We already saw some asshole from ESPN, I think, telling the rioters to burn that shit and reverse course as soon as the mob was ready to burn down his neighborhood. You got a link for that one? Tweet me that one. I wouldn't be surprised if it's so, but I'd like to read it. El Vaquero, traffic stops and domestic violence calls are where cops are most likely to get killed. Traffic stops are the most common police action, and the perp will be there in a domestic violence call. More often than not, yeah. Yeah, unpredictable, because you're dealing with, you don't know what you're walking into. You don't know how long it's been going on. You don't know what the fight is. You don't know if one person is lying about the other person and the other person's actually the threat, and so on and so forth. If there are children involved, oh man, it's just a time bomb. Let's see. Jim Healis, if no crimes are reported, then crime stats go down, thus no more crime. You're right. How can we reduce crime? Well, if there's nobody, if a crime occurs without law enforcement, is it really a crime? The tree falls in a forest. And let's see. Scrappy, sheriff doesn't have to bother with our neighborhood. If you've got a roving gang of community vigilantes willing to dole out justice without asking too many questions, then sure. Who needs a sheriff? Yeah, who needs due process? All right, let's just assume the guilt of someone accused, first and foremost. And if someone steals your car, well, you shouldn't get mad. You should really ask, Gosh, why was that person stealing my car? Never mind that you don't have your car, that your livelihood is under threat because your car was stolen. No, let's think about the person that stole your car. Won't you give them a thought for a minute before you think about yourself? Because that's just selfish. That's what I got from that anecdote he gave us. And Scrappy, read before that, Scribe. I said after a hurricane, Scribe. Oh, sorry, I didn't have any context. This is what happens when I don't have context. Holy shit, just carry on without context. Well, that's the thing. I don't have any context. When I see a statement there, I read it. I don't know. I carry on without context. So give me some context. You give me some context. Now I've got it. So my joke, still relevant to that statement all by itself. Corwin D showed up late and have to backtrack. Always nice to see you, Scribe. Thank you, Corwin. And let's see. Healer owned. Yep, between the side effects, stigma, and outright cost, many simply find it easier to self-medicate. Oh, that was a response to Zalblay. Sorry. Let's see. Zalblay owned a lot of addiction. Oh, a lot of addiction stems from undiagnosed, treated mental health issue. Yeah, people self-medicate, and then it becomes a bigger problem. Then you get mental health in addition to addiction, which of course just leads to all sorts of fun. And Havoc Vladimirovich Stalinov, whatever happened to the stockades and flogging? Not only is it a punishment, it is a deterrent to others. Oh, you want to rob someone? Well, a week in the stockades with only bread and water. Well, stockades turned into prisons, turned into law enforcement, and so on and so forth. You know, conceivably, there is some disincentive to robbing and hurting someone if you think or know that you'll have to face consequences. But if you remove the police entirely, even those people that already commit crimes with that hanging over their head will feel even more empowered to do so. So I don't understand. And this guy did not make an argument for a world without cops. And Satsu, hello, Satsu. So yeah, guys, in a way, I have to apologize. I honestly thought that this article would be a bit more in-depth, that the speaker, the author, the expert would have more to say and a more concrete proposal to give, but I guess that's the best he's got in a pinch. I don't have any plans on reading his book because I have a feeling I'm going to come away from that with as much understanding of what the proposal is for a world without police. So anyway, guys, thank you for joining me for this slightly different live stream than I've done recently. I do have a TEDx regarding police reform ready to go. I will do that tomorrow. Granted that everything lines up with my schedule. I will post about that tomorrow. Regardless, everyone, thank you for joining me for this. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your participation. And thank you so much for your generosity. I'll look to see if I can find more articles of interest to read in the future, because I do like doing this, even if I read the news every night otherwise. Because I like reading, even if I stumble over my words, because I'm human, I think. Anyway, guys, hope you guys have a good rest of your Sunday. I hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, get well soon. And I'll talk to you later. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.